to taste better. So like I said in the beginning, when you're talking about the natural flavoring, the art of cooking goes in patience. You know, many times when someone is cooking onions, when they're translucent, or when they have barely cooked, we've already added our onion, our tomatoes. And before the tomatoes are broken down and cooked, we've already added whatever it is we are cooking. Generally, when we tend to do that, then the food ends up being a one flavor zone, you know? It becomes a monotone, so to speak. But if you let each and every ingredient have time to cook and release its natural flavor, then it becomes a balance that produces flavor in our food. Okay, so now, vegetable stock, because, you know, many times you're looking for, you know, when we're adding those things like the aromatics, we are looking for this base that will add to our stews and whatever to bring flavor. And the best way to do that is normally to have a vegetable stock. And we can always make our own vegetable stock. You know, it's something you can begin, like, you know, probably in the morning, because it's just about, you know, throwing your vegetables in a pot and putting in some herbs and some salt, and you know, and you just boil it down until a point where it sort of reduces. Then now it becomes a point, so that now after you've cooked your onions and your tomatoes and stuff like that, instead of adding water, you're adding your vegetable stock, which adds flavor to your food. If you're cooking rice, then, you know, you mix water plus your vegetable stock, and then you add your rice will also end up having the flavor of that vegetable. Anything that you're cooking in the savory world, if you use vegetable stock, it actually go away in adding flavor to your food. So you can make your own vegetable stock. But now here we are saying that vegetables that you need to avoid when making vegetable stock. Okay, it seems contrary to the title, but not every vegetable is destined for vegetable stock. Starchy vegetables like potatoes and turnips will make for a gummy, cloudy vegetable stock. Beets will overpower their aromatic counterparts. Zucchini and green beans become bitter when they're slow simmered for a long time. So we also note that we have to choose the vegetables that we use when you're making our vegetable stock. So 2 ways to add more flavor to your stock are to roast the vegetables. Like I'd said before, anytime you roast vegetables, it always brings out their inherent flavor. Or let them sweat. You know, when you're letting them sweat, it means that now you put a little oil in the pan, and then now you put those vegetables and just let them cook a little bit, you know, and then as they start browning, then that does the same effect like roasting, because that will also bring out the flavor that they have. So gather some vegetables and herbs. So now this is the process of making a vegetable stock. Yeah. Now you take your onions, your carrots, celery. These ones are the building blocks of a good stock. If you have onions, you have carrots, and you have celery, you'll definitely have a very good vegetable stock, because they give the vegetable stock a great base flavor. And you can round this out, you know, with herbs. You can also make stock using any amount of vegetables that you happen to have on hand. But also remember what we had said, that there are some vegetables that are not good in making stock. Yeah. So it's good to have a roughly equal portion of each, so that the resulting stock will have a balanced flavor, so that now there's not one that is overpowering the other. So all you need to do is coarsely chop all the vegetables, wash them properly, and then you chop them, and then now cover with water and bring to a simmer. So now you put the vegetables in a pot that is in, and then now you put water that is enough to, you know, to cover them, and then you just let it simmer for a while, for a long while, until you see like you'll even smell it when it is, because now you start smelling the smell of the veggies that now are getting cooked. So less water means that your stock will be more concentrated. More water makes a lighter flavored stock. So set the pot over medium-high heat and bring it just to a boil. Then once you start seeing some bubbles around the edges of the pot and some steam, turn the heat down to medium-low, and then you let it cook. So for about an hour. It's not an exact science, but 1 hour is generally enough to make time for the water to infuse with the vegetable goodness. If you need to take it off the heat a little earlier, or don't get to until the end of a little later, it will be fine. Give it a stir every now and again to circulate the vegetables. So strain, and then you have your vegetable stock, so that now when you're making your rice, you're making, or any grain that you want to cook, you can always add the stock, so that now the end flavor of it will actually be a bomb of flavor, as we were talking about. So now that is about natural flavoring. Now let's come to leavening. So to leaven makes to make light or to raise. Leavening agents a leavening agent is a substance which causes expansion of doughs and batters by the release of gases within such mixtures, producing baked goods with porous structure. Such agents include air, steam, yeast, baking powder, and baking soda. And sometimes they also use ammonia. So leavening is more in baking. So leavening gases are responsible for the volume in most baked food products. They are responsible for expanding the air bubbles that have been mixed, creamed, kneaded, or whipped into the batter or dough. Leaveners also contribute to the baked goods taste, coloring, and texture. So the 4 basic leavening gases that are used in the world. The basic leavening gases commonly found in baking recipes are air, water, vapor or steam, carbon dioxide, and the biological ones. Now that's the yeast factor. In baking recipes, one or more leavening agents participate in the leavening process. However, chemical leaveners and yeast usually are not combined, but there are some recipe exceptions. In some frozen or refrigerated dough found in the grocery store, yeast and chemical leaveners complement each other. So you can imagine this is a situation where you've added yeast, which is a fungus, and then you've also added carbon dioxide, which is the basis of our chemical leavening. That becomes a very potent piece of bread or baked good that you're taking. So air, which is mechanical, the mechanical action of whipping, when you're whipping a baked good, will incorporate tiny air bubbles into the recipe. So these air cells will expand during the baking process from the leaveners. Note that with this air, it is not the air alone, but you're beating it so that now the leavener gets combined with this air to create now more volume in your baked good, causing the recipe to rise. The proper whipping of the product and the proper incorporation of air into the batter, usually by folding, are of utmost importance to the leavening of the final recipe, such as the unshortened form cakes. Mechanical leavening is achieved by using different mixing techniques. So note that if you go unleavened, you will never have a cake that will rise to the level that the ones that have baking powder, baking soda, and all those things do, or yeast has, because that process of raising is from products that we are trying to avoid because they have harmful effects to our bodies. So examples are when you're creaming butter and sugar, when you're kneading, mixing, or beating and stirring, when you're whipping eggs, particularly separated eggs, like egg whites, they tend to really foam and froth a lot. With whipping aids such as sugar and cream of tartar. I mean, as you're noticing, some of these things that are being mentioned here are things that we have purpose to abstain from because of from previous sessions that we've had, that things that are very harmful to our health. This method produces particularly light and delicate recipes. So whipping aquafaba. So this aquafaba is simply the juice that forms when beans or legumes are cooked. Most aquafaba is actually gotten from chickpeas. When you take your chickpeas after you've soaked them and then now you're boiling them, that water that you use to boil, that water that they've been boiled with, if you whip it, it normally brings that same effect that that the egg whites do. So this is the only what I can call natural way, apart from the others that that are in this list. So how beaten egg whites work? When you whip an egg white, you're really stretching the protein in them. As a result, they unwind and join together loosely, making them unstable. So the liquid albumin forms elastic films around the air bubbles, beating into them and essentially traps them, which you can see as a foam. So when the foam is heated, the trapped tiny air cells expand from the heat of the oven and or carbon dioxide release, because when you have your egg whites, you also put baking soda, you put baking powder. So if used, causing a batter to rise. During baking, the egg protein coagulates around them, giving permanence to the foam. So egg whites have a great ability to expand and give volume. However, with the same weight of egg yolk, they are less elastic. So note that I'm just presenting this as what the world does, not what we're supposed to be doing. So that now you understand that when you make a vegan cake, it will never be to that same, softness or fluffiness that you're looking for, because what causes the cake to do that is is this thing that we are abstaining from. So when you use water vapor or steam, this is now liquid. Steam leavened recipes include pastries such as the choux pastry, and quick bread such as popovers. The crust traps the steam inside, generated from its ingredients. It is this principle that causes them to become inflated, hollow, and stay puffy if properly baked. So steaming is a method that we could investigate to see how well it can work for us. So carbon dioxide. I note that from previous seminars that we've always had, we're always saying that our bodies need oxygen, not carbon dioxide. This is the chemical leaveners. Chemical leavening agents also produce expansion with the release of carbon dioxide. So modern baking powders are combinations of baking soda, this is sodium bicarbonate, and dry acids or acid salts, usually with starch added for stability in storage. So single-acting baking powders containing tartaric acid or cream of tartar release carbon dioxide at room temperature, and mixtures in which they are used must be baked immediately to avoid loss of most of the gas. Slow-acting baking powders containing phosphates release part of their gas at room temperature and part when they're heated. That's why when you put them in the oven, now they continue to rise. Double baking powder, the most widely used type, contains sodium, aluminum sulfate, and calcium acid phosphate, and releases a small amount of gas when mixed and the balance when heated. So as you can see, when you're using baking soda, when you're using baking powder, these are the reactions that you're getting, which are the reactions that are not supposed to be consumed in our bodies. Carbon dioxide, these are chemical leaveners. Baking soda is added to doughs and batters in which acid is provided by other ingredients such as honey, sour cream, molasses, or cocoa. If used without acidic ingredients, baking soda may produce yellowing and undesirable odors and flavors. So you're noticing that the baking soda, when it mixes with the acid, then now it produces a carbon dioxide. And I'm sure the chemists or the doctors will tell us that there will be other byproducts that will be causing harm to our body. So the biological ones. Now, yeast fermentation. Yeast is the most commonly used leavener in bread baking. And the secret to bread baking lies in its fermentation. Note that now this is fermentation that now causes bread. And that's why bread, amongst all these things, bread is a very dangerous thing for us. Or the metabolic action of yeast. These are commercial yeast, which is a member of the Saccharomyces, okay, that species, and is actually a member of the mushroom family. It possesses the basic attributes of all living things, which are respiration and reproduction. And also we have what we call sourdough starters or wild yeasts and bacteria. Predominant yeast belongs to the Saccharomyces minor family and is called Saccharomyces exiguus. So leavening may be achieved by the process of fermentation, which releases carbon dioxide gas. Baker's yeast, composed of living cells of the yeast strain, is available as a pressed cake and in a powdered form. When added to doughs, yeast initiates fermentation by acting upon certain sugars contributed by other dough ingredients, releasing both carbon dioxide and substances that affect the flavor and aroma of the baked product. Yeast leavened products include most types of breads and rolls, such as sweet dough products as coffee cakes, raised donuts, Danish pastries. So most of those things that you see, I mean, if the breads that you see have huge holes, we always see holy breads. Those ones, it's a process of not the yeast and the fermentation. So the sourdough method used for dry breads employs a small portion of dough or sponge in which sugar fermenting bacteria have been allowed to develop. When added to a fresh dough mixture, the sponge produces fermentation. Commercial sour cultures are sometimes used as substitute for naturally fermented sourdoughs. So notice that all these things, fermentation, we have introduction of carbon dioxide, those are all things that cause immense harm to our bodies and things that we have been, training upon training that we've gone through, we are being taught that we should try to avoid. So in the baking process, one of the things that we're always trying to achieve, what eggs actually do is to try and create some rise and also to help our products to bind. And so for us who are in the vegan world, we can look at what an egg replaces. And as I said earlier, there is no replacement that will help to lift a cake or a baked good to the level that it uses, that it will get to if you're using the worldly leaveners that there are. But in these ways, we can try to reduce the density of our baked goods as much as is possible. So we can use fruits. Mashed fruits as an egg substitute works best in moist and dense recipes, such as brownies, muffins, pancakes, and waffles. And then we have legumes and seeds. These are now your chia seeds, your flax seeds, and all those. They work more as binders. They will work well in cookie recipes, as these usually only call for 1 to 2 eggs. In recipes with all-purpose flour or any gluten-containing flour, and in brownies or blondies, anywhere where it's okay if the center is a little gluey. So they don't work well in recipes with more than 2 eggs. In coconut flour recipes also, because this is a very tricky flour, or in flourless recipes. So let's note that even as we are working to replace, eggs in our baked goods, note that, we cannot use these methods in cakes or in baked products that traditionally require a lot of eggs. Because some of these things, they will change the texture, they will change the flavor of your baked good, and they will not act the same way, because now instead of reducing the density, they'll actually work to increase the density. So most of these replacers work well for recipes where the original recipe required just 1 or 2 eggs. So if we talk about unsweetened applesauce, which we also talked about initially when we talk about adding flavor. So now you replace 1 egg with a 1/4 cup of applesauce. So you see the tricky bit why, now if you have a cake that had 4 eggs, now imagine you'll be using like quarter, a full nene. So some of these things will end up making it too moist, such that now when you put it in the oven to bake, it might not actually dry out, because there's too much moisture in the batter. So it bakes best in muffins, in brownies, in cakes, and in bars. And something also I noticed that when you're trying to do vegan pastries, things like your big pound cakes are very difficult to work out in a vegan setup, because they, on top of having eggs, most of those cakes will have eggs plus they'll have leaveners. So trying to replace those ingredients to make it rise to that level is very difficult. So some of the things like cookies, things like brownies, things like bars, these things are easier because they're small in size, and then in the original recipes they don't require, they're not leavened as much as the big cakes. So for applesauce is avoid using more than 1 cup in any recipe, as it can create a rubbery texture. So ripe banana is also a very good replacement. You replace 1 egg with a 1/4 cup to 1/2 cup of mashed or pureed bananas. This works well for muffins and for cakes. So also note that very ripe bananas will leave a hint of flavor and increase sweetness. And can also, if you use too much, it will also create a rubbery texture. You'll have a cake that is elastic in nature. So if you like the flavor of bananas, then leaving the hint of flavor is not really an issue. But because of the sweetness, you'll note that now, if you're using it as a replacement, that you'll need to adjust the sweetness of the original cake that you are trying to mimic. Avocados can also work. So you replace one egg with a 1/4 cup of mashed or pureed avocado. It's also best in, as I'm saying, note most of them will be muffins, cakes, and brownies. It can also replace oil and give a greenish hue to your finished product. We can use pumpkin puree. Replace 1 egg with a 1/4 cup again of mashed or pureed pumpkin. It's good for muffins and for cookies. It is not used as a binder, but it acts more to add moisture to your baked good, and it will also add its distinct flavor. So if you don't want the flavor of the pumpkin to come across, then this might not be the best way for you. So you can also use rehydrated and pureed prunes, or this is supposed to be raisins or soaked dates. So you replace 1 egg with a 1/4 cup of the pureed fruits. It works well in muffins and in cookies and also in cakes. Note that it will make the recipe sweeter. So if you are using any other sweetener, you'll need to adjust the sweetening. As we had said, you can use silken tofu. Silken tofu comes from our soybeans. You make it using soy milk. So you replace 1 egg with a 1/4 cup of silken tofu in a blender, adding water until it is smooth. This works well. The silken tofu is actually better because it goes across a wider range of baked goods. It can work in pies, in quick breads, which we are, if you're not adding other leaveners, but now that will make our own bread dense, and in muffins and in dense cakes. And then it can be very heavy. Avoid using recipes that call for multiple eggs. Baked goods will not brown as deeply as well. What we most commonly use are ground flaxseed or chia seeds. You replace 1 egg. To replace 1 egg, you will take 1 tablespoon of the ground flaxseed or chia seed, and then you mix it with tablespoons of water, and then you stir it and let it sit on your counter for like 15 minutes. After 15 minutes, you'll notice that it will become gelatinous. So now after it becomes gelatinous, then now you whip it the way you'd whip an egg white. Then now you fold it into your baked goods. Okay, and when I'm putting bread here, we are talking about our unleavened bread. You're not talking about the yeasted leavened bread. So if you're trying to make bread using our unleavened methods. So it adds an earthy, nutty taste and can create a firm or chewy texture best with hearty baked goods. And also note that when it comes to chia and flaxseed, the chia seed is actually better because chia, for one, has a lighter color, so it will not change the color of your baked good, and also it has a milder flavor, unlike the flaxseed. So even if you're called to use a lot more, it will not bring out its flavor as much as the flaxseed will, because the flaxseed, if you use too much, can produce a bitter flavor because flaxseed has a stronger flavor. And then we have the psyllium husks. So to replace 1 egg, you stir in 1 teaspoon of the psyllium powder in 3 tablespoons of water. And then like with the seeds, you let it sit for 15 minutes until it becomes gelatinous. This one is good also for cakes and for cookies. This one is thought to be the best amongst all this because they say it has excellent pliability and flexibility, and also you will not detect it its flavor or its color because the husks are whitish in color. Then aquafaba, which I talked about earlier, this is the liquid you can drain off when you boil your chickpeas or your beans. So this one acts a lot more like the egg white. That when you take that water and you whisk it using you whisk it using that electric whisk, it actually rises and foams the way an egg white does. So to replace an egg, you take 1 tablespoon will replace 1 egg yolk, 2 tablespoons will replace an egg white, 3 tablespoons will replace a whole egg. So it can work in cakes, in cookies, and in meringues because of that ability that it has to behave like an egg white. So when whipped, it turns thick and gelatinous like the egg whites do. So here I have, a basic recipe of a vegan almond butter blondies that you can try to, to begin your quest in, if you've not been a baker before, to try and make it to enjoy some dessert. So the ingredients are you use chia seeds, and remember what we said, 1 tablespoon of the chia seeds will give you 3 tablespoons of water, and this will replace an egg. Then you have on any 1 cup of your almond butter or any nut butter that you have. You can use 1/2 cup of jaggery as your sweetener, and then you can use vanilla, but be sure that you look for vanilla because most vanilla extracts that you find in the supermarket are normally alcohol extracted. In fact, you find that very little of it is alcohol. Is actually vanilla. So if you can find real vanilla, then you can add it to your flavor, and then you can add some salt. Then now you'll preheat your oven, and then in a large bowl, combine the chia seeds and the water, and then you let it sit aside. And then you add your butter, your jaggery, your vanilla and salt, and then stir, and then until the butter is thick. Then you transfer it to a baking sheet and put it in the oven. Then you let it bake for about 20 minutes or until, like a spatula or a knife that you pass through comes out clean. Then you know that the inside has cooked. And with that, we have come to the end of our presentation. If you have any questions or any comments, please. Yeah, the floor is open.
Hello.
Hello.
Yes, thank you so much for that very informative presentation, Sister Dorothy. When you
Yes.
said that, you said something about using the ground flaxseed. Is the chia seed also grounded? I wasn't quite sure
Yes.
if that. Okay,
Yes. Yeah.
okay, I wanted
It
to be
works better when
sure.
it's yeah, it
It,
works better when it's grounded, because when you use it as the whole seed, you would still have to blend so that not the seeds disappear.
mm-hmm.
Otherwise, yeah, or unless you don't mind the texture of those seeds in your baked good, then it's okay.
Okay,
You
so
don't really.
both are grounded. Okay, yes, that's
Yeah.
what I want to be sure. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Yeah, thank you so much, Sister Dorothy. We can have questions coming up. Sister Dorothy is there to answer the questions. We can have in the chat box, and as well we can ask even through speaking. Welcome.
I was just about to ask a question. Good morning, Sister Dorothy.
Good morning, Neva.
I love to put my flaxseed whole in my bread. Would it still work as a leveling?
Yes, a leavener. Yes, it's okay. Like I said, I mean, mostly people use brown ground because you don't want maybe to feel the texture of the seeds. But if you're okay with that texture, it's very okay to use them whole. So long as you remember, you just put them in the water to let it become glutinous. Then now you mix in the other ingredients. It is very fine if you like it that way.
Thank you.
You're
Thank you so
welcome.
much. There's a question there, Sister Dorothy, in the chat box. Okay, we have someone was saying there. We also have bean pod powder after burning. So that one I don't know about it. Maybe you can tell us
Yeah,
first.
wow. No, that one I
Yeah.
don't know, so I'm learning something new.
Okay, maybe she'll tell us much about it. And then another question is that what is the best option when baking a light cake or fruit cakes that require lots of eggs?
Yeah, that's why I began in the beginning by saying this is a disclaimer that when you come into the vegan world, you will not find a cake that will be, some of those to make a cake as light as it is using the leaveners. Currently, I have not found yet, and it has not been found, because you see the issue is the reason that these leaveners were introduced is because traditionally cakes never used to rise to that much. So someone says, oh, they want a lighter cake, so they ended up introducing ammonia. They moved on to baking soda and on to baking powder. All these were in the effort to create a lighter, fluffier cake. And so in the vegan world, you will not find a cake that a cake that has a lot of eggs, it's very hard to use them, because if you use these alternatives and replace the way we've replaced a lot of with the alternatives to try and make it lighter, you'll end up having sometimes a more dense cake. You'll end up having a cake that will not cook in the middle because the liquid is too much. You might end up having a cake that is overpowered by the alternative that you're using. For instance, if you're using like banana, it might end up tasting too banana-y, or it might end up tasting too avocado-y, or now the flaxseed, now because it is too much, becomes too bitter. So it is very difficult to actually replace what the world makes in terms of fruit cakes and light cakes in the vegan world.
Thank you. So we have another question here. It seems people really want to know much about the substitutes of maybe baking soda. Like the question that says, what is the best to use instead of baking soda, especially when baking bread? What is best to use?
Wow. Yeah, these are the challenges of baking in the vegan world, because like I've said, those baking sodas and baking powders were introduced because it was not possible naturally to be able to lift breads or cakes to the state that we currently see them in the world today. So it becomes very difficult. So now, instead of thinking replacements, which is how I will end our presentation, instead of thinking replacement, let us think of, because I remember when I began my vegan journey, it was so difficult because I was always trying to look for flavors that I loved in the animal kingdom, in the plant kingdom. So I would look for a way to make, to to make a burger that tasted like a big beef burger that I had. I was looking to, to find cheese that tasted like the Parmesan cheese that I used to eat. But then I realized in the end that if you look at just adding flavor to your food instead of replacing or mimicking what you had in the previous world, then life becomes much easier. So that now, when you're trying to bake, don't try to figure out how can I make a fruit cake like they make in the world. Try and figure out how can I try and make a fruit cake. And in those experimentations, that is how maybe in the baking world we can end up finding cakes that are not really what they are in the world, but cakes that are still flavorful and work within the setup that we are in. Because replacing meat will never taste like plants. So the fruit cake that has yeast, the bread that has yeast will never taste like any bread that you will make. And it will never rise the way it will rise for us in the vegan world. So let us change our mindset to try and think of new things of doing instead of trying to look of ways of doing what we were doing before. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes sense. I guess the one who asked, are you answered? Maybe you can let us know whether you are answered. So other questions, or I can see some comments. Okay, there's something I forgot up there. They are asking Sister Dorothy is it possible to share the presentation document? That one will be told by Molly that it's possible. So, and someone else as well is saying, can we have this information or the replacement, please? That will help them. That is just a comment. So another question. This is what Beatrice is telling us. She's saying that burnt bean pod powder is also culturally used to make tough veggies like cowpeas or pumpkin leaves. We use the liquid after decanting the powder. Thanks for the information. I don't know whether Sister Dorothy, you know that.
Yes, it's like what we do here when we use the banana skin. You burn it and then add it to water so that now we can, that's what we normally use for making. We call it, in the community, they call it munyu. Instead of using magadi soda. So we use it to cook now the bitter greens. So that is the natural way of cooking the bitter greens.
Okay, therefore we can use that one as well in our bakings. Okay, thank you. So another question is, which wheat flour alternatives can be used and still be able to provide a nice cake? That question.
For that one now, we'd need, because you can always replace wheat flour, but what happens is you would need to, because different cakes have different the different ways in which they behave. So like rice flour would, you have different ways of mixing them, but it is possible. That's something, like I can do some research and figure out, but the people who try to figure out, like if I'm replacing with which other flour blends can I use, but those ones are there. I just don't have them at the top of my mind. I mean, the things I've been trying to experiment with, because we have many flours. You can use oat flour in our baking. You can use rice flour. You can use cassava flour. We can use all these flour, but we need to note that they have different textures and different densities. I know like cassava flour can be replaced one-to-one with cassava flour. I mean, can be replaced one-to-one with wheat flour. But you see, cassava has a distinct taste. So, you might have to mix it with something else and stuff like that. So some of these things, it's a work of experimentation and reading online to see people who have tried them, and then now you try them yourself, and in that journey you come up with ways of making the baking journey interesting in the vegan world.
Oh, thank you. So another question comes from our sister asking, generally, is whole wheat bad?
Wheat always gets a bad rap, and I want to invite my sister Dorcas to just talk about this part. Dorcas.
Yes, please.
Sister Dorcas, please. Please repeat the question.
The question was, generally, is whole wheat bad? Is whole wheat bad?
wheat is not the problem. Yes, and I like that. If those of you who were in Inspector Bob's presentation earlier, talking about, he mentioned a little bit about even the genetically modified ones. Are you following? It's the adulteration by the hand of man that causes it to become a problem. And the second thing is the processing. So one way of adulterating the wheat is the fact that it's GMO. The second one is that most wheat products are usually fermented or leavened. Yes, think about the things that people make from wheat. It's bread, it's cake. There are a lot of other things that are making a good thing. Yeah, as Sister White puts it, yeah, the devil takes the good things God has given for food and turns them into poison. So that's the issue. That's the main issue. And I've seen people who were gluten intolerant and intolerant to so many other things. And when they leave out the leaven, you find that they're tolerant to wheat or to beans or to whatever. Yeah. So the issue is the thing that God made is good for food. Yes. And there's a lot we can explain about that. So it's mainly, you're looking at the wrong thing. You're looking at the food and the wheat itself and forgetting the processing, the procedures that make it a problem. So a lot of intolerance for different things are because of leaven. Yes, the thing that is used to process it.
Thank you very much, Sister Dorcas. I don't know whether Sister Nyambura, you answered. Okay. Okay, let's then go to the next question. Oh, she's saying partly, so she's not yet contented, but I guess you're gonna get much information. So the next question is, do you have a recipe for gluten-free, please, to make bread vegan? Sister Dorothy?
I would have to look for one, because you see, I learned that unlike the baking soda and
Sister Dot, there's going to be a
yes,
day for unleavened cakes recipes.
wonderful.
So
Good.
let them wait.
So they'll tune in for that day.
Yes, I think it's either the end of July or early August. I'll check, but let them tune in for that.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Elder Jim, for that. So we are inviting those who've got most of those questions to attend that session. And still, Sister Nyambura is asking a question on top, that if I purchase the wheat, she's asking, so if she purchases the wheat cereal and take it to the mill, will that be okay?
That is actually the best. That is the best. Instead of buying this, because you see the store-bought ones, most of them that we find packaged, because of shelf life, you'll find that they'll, in fact, a lot of people who, because nowadays, that's what I do. I buy milled, all the flours that I use, I buy milled, or like, even if I want to use oat flour, I will actually buy the oats themselves and I will grind them myself. Any flour that I make nowadays, I actually buy and you'll notice that with time, if you taste, because I remember one time I have a neighbor who is diabetic. So they came to look, because they knew we use brown flour, they came to ask for some. And one of the daughters was telling me that she never liked brown flour. So now when they came and asked for some and we gave them, she came back the following day and she said she actually, she didn't know that brown flour could taste that, that nice. So now I told her it's because ours is actually milled. So you'll actually notice that if you switch to flour that actually grind from the cereal itself, the flavor is very different because it doesn't have preservatives and additives that are added to the packaged ones.
Wow, thank you. So that is the best way. Someone still asking that her net was not okay, so she's asking the alternative for baking powder.
Like we said, we're not looking for alternatives for baking powder. We're just looking for ways to reduce density in our baked goods. And that's why now we're talking about our using the seeds, the legumes, using the fruits in our baked goods, because we can never really replace. You see, the problem with replacing is you will not find something that does the same thing that baking powder does, because what baking powder does is as you saw in the presentation that I was doing, that it introduces the chemical that combines with the acid in the baking process to produce carbon dioxide. And those are the things we are trying to avoid doing. We want to move away from introducing carbon dioxide into our systems. So if we look for a replacement, it means that we have to introduce something that produces the same reaction. And that is a reaction that we are trying to avoid. So what we are trying to do instead is just to put some sort of lift into our baked goods without without introducing fungus, without introducing carbon dioxide, without introducing by products of chemical reactions into our baked goods, so that now we are having healthy goods that we are eating that are healthy as well as tasty.
Thank you. There's a sister commenting saying that she gets into the habit of eating flat bread instead of raised bread. So no issue with wheat or yeast. That is okay. So
Yeah,
I don't know whether there's still questions.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know whether there's still questions. There's still room for questions as time is still on our side, I guess. So yeah, we're still inviting questions, or as well, Mama Musa, you can tell us something.
And we'd also like to invite Elder Jim to just talk about leavening, because I know leavening is an issue that many people face, and many people have a challenge living in this vegan world, because you see that most vegans in the world, are not leaven free. They are animal free, but they're not leaven free. So Elder Jim, do you have any comments, please?
Yes, I think it's well placed. Your information is well placed, is loaded up. I may have very little to add today, but this is a topic that we've always talked about, and we've always put in a lot of information on it. So I may not have much to say. The only thing that I want to say is the Bible says, "Thou shalt not leaven." Period. That's simple. So whatever we are doing that you see, you're loaded with a lot of statements, explanations. It's just to widen the understanding, or to make it broad, make broad the understanding on the facts that leaven is not good. Thou shalt not leaven. That's why we have a memorial. The memorial says we have the Feast of Unleavened Bread. So the Feast of Unleavened Bread is something that we do, like for the Adventists, it's quarterly. Quarterly, we do a memorial. And Jesus said, "Do this in remembrance of me." So as we do this in remembrance of him, we also educate ourselves why we have to do that. Otherwise, thank you so much. It was nice, wonderful. Keep it up. We'll wait for you another time when you come back with more facts.
Good morning, Brother Jim.
Good morning. How are you? Oh, yeah, it is.
Yeah, I am. Yeah, it is good.
Yes.
And good morning, Sister Dorothy and everyone else. Brother Jim, I think one of the most powerful statements that was made this morning was that we should not try, we have to train our taste bud to get away from the taste of what we had in our past life. All right? We have to train our taste bud to embrace the reformed diet. All right, so a lot of times the spices that we use, the condiments, all of these, we're trying to get back as near as possible to what we had given up. And then we search in every way to do that. But if the diet is reformed, it means the taste buds have to be reformed also, exactly, so that we can have a better appreciation for that which is natural. All right.
Yes. Now, based on what you've said, and that is why we ask people to progressively reform. When somebody comes in, the first change of taste may not be very pleasant, and that may may shake somebody's decision to, to change or to make changes. So the first thing is educate them. Once you educate people, somebody would do something consciously. Somebody may do with a reason or give a reason for what you're doing. If you give a reason for what you're doing, then you're encouraged to do it more. But if you just want to go by the taste buds only, you'll not manage. And that's why appetite, if you give appetite an opportunity to rule, they will rule with an iron fist. But if you give the frontal lobe an opportunity to reason or to rule, they will give you better reasons, and they will direct you to the right path. And that's why the Lord wants us to enhance the frontal lobe other than use hypothalamus. And number two, just by beginning to eat fresh, it bypasses your level of addiction. Just beginning to eat fresh, just beginning, the Lord gave it that avoid leftover. Just by avoiding leftover, you begin to change your taste buds. What we're talking about, the umami taste. Umami is there to, to suppress your reasoning, and give power to your taste, so that you will not reason. You just go by, I don't like it, I can't take this. But if you do food for every day, meaning you do your food for every day, every food that comes into your mouth has no traces of fermentation, then it will help you make good decisions. So the three go together. Thank you so much for what you've said. It is progressive. Some people may see it immediately. Some people may see the fact years later.
Thank you so much, Elder Jim, and as well, Sister Joanne, for the important message. So there's two questions as well concerning what we were studying. Really, it's a presentation that has got a lot of questions that are so disturbing many people. So there's a question, is energy replacement good? Sister Dorothy?
What is what?
Is energy. Ena, a hyphen, and then G.
What is, I don't know what that is.
Okay. Maybe Brother Jim can help us, or okay, as well, I'm not familiar with it. So it's asking, is energy replacement good? That is a question. So as we get to ponder about that one, another question is someone is asking that she has a question in regard to this presentation and the previous presentation. So she's asking if there's a platform where they are placed, like YouTube, where someone can access them later, or she's asking if you can share with them, or there's a link that has been provided there.
Yes, I don't know how much time we have to go and explain all this, but just a quick one. Our YouTube is free. You can just log on there and watch these things back and forth anytime you want. We're putting the information there to help each and everyone. So Medical Missionary Movement, if you go to Medical Missionary Movement, you'll get everything that has been posted. We are still posting the previous ones or the past ones. Just for you to know that the topic on leavening or fermentation or yeast or stuff, we have tons, a lot of those presentations that many of them are not uploaded yet. But just keep checking, because we'll be uploading them based on the questions that people ask, because we have lesser time to answer them. They'll always be on there. So I think the next coming weeks, we'll be putting them up there and you'll get them. It's not easy to just send these videos to each and every person, but when they are on YouTube, you'll get them.
Yeah, thank you very much. So I guess our time is almost coming to an end. So I'd like as well to invite our sister Molly to say something. She's been quiet. We're inviting her to say something because we have few minutes so that we get to finish our program. Sister Molly, welcome.
Imelda,
Yes?
can I just, because I've seen what Natasha is saying, energy, she's saying it's an replacer.
Yes.
And I've seen what she's written there as the ingredients. You see, when I began the presentation, I talked about the different ways of leavening that are out there in the world. And if you look at the ingredients that you've put, and in fact, you've even put there, the leavening is calcium lactate, calcium carbonate, cream of tartar, sodium carbomethylcellulose. You see, those now become the chemical elements. Because remember when I started, I talked about the chemical elements of leavening. Those are the issues that now will make your egg replacer identity, because they'll cause chemical reactions that will introduce carbon dioxide, and then they'll also have other byproducts. I hope that answers your question, Natasha.
Yeah. Now that you're hatching it back again, let me just say something a little about bicarbonate or carbonate. Carbonates or bicarbonates are very unstable. They're very unstable, and they're minus. They come in as minus. They come in with the minus attitude to bind in order for them to become compounds, and they attach themselves to any elements higher on the reactivity series, beginning with potassium as you go down. So every time you have either calcium carbonate or sodium carbonate or something carbonate, immediately the carbonate enters into the system or the mouth. As it goes down to the stomach, it detaches based on meeting any other element higher on the reactivity series, and that's why it causes craving or quenching. And whenever it causes craving or quenching, it detaches from its current binder to the next binder. After it's past the taste buds, or it past the taste, the mouth, it loses that taste. And so the formulas that have been released to break down that particular food tries to find the food that the taste had given. It finds that it's not there. That's why every now and then you eat it and you feel like you want it again. You eat it and you feel like you want it again. You eat it and you feel like you want it again, because it tears off the already compounded food that has come into the system. That's why it's not good. It tears off, and that's why it's also used for washing. It's also used. They're also used for washing bicarbonates or carbonates. They're used for washing because they bind any free radicals that are found there, or any elements that are higher in their reactivity series. If it comes with that, it will bind them up. That's the property, and that's why it's not good for us, because it tears us off.
Thank you, Elder Jim, for that.
Yeah, Sister Molly, we were inviting you to say something before we get to finish. We've got like 8 minutes so that we finish our session. I don't know whether we have still time or we are supposed to finish.
We can't hear anything. Molly, are you still with us? I think she's having network issues.
Oh yeah, I guess she's a bit breaking. Yeah, she's communicating on the chat.
Maybe just Mama Musa will just wind it up. The Dockers will just wind it up.
Sure. Mama Musa, welcome.
Yeah, while we're waiting for Mama Musa, thank you guys so much for coming in. Dr. Lumley, are you still there? Yeah, maybe she's.
I'm here, Helder.
Oh, yeah. Thank you so much for coming in. And we are planning to organize something wider and broad on leavening, on fermentation, on yeast, on decomposers, and all the diseases that come with it. There are about 48 known diseases that come with yeast or yeast infections or leavening. 48 known. They come in, mostly they're called symptoms, but these symptoms, people end up in hospitals or